there's been a lot of changes in our world and with AI and everything. And while I enjoyed a few months of looking like Superman, I think there's a spectrum of people that know at least parts of this information. Uh, so the goal of today's presentation is just bring everyone up to speed with everything I know. And if you take 10% away from this, my job's done. And if you can tell me like what would you do differently, what could be better, I love getting that kind of feedback. So here's everything I know, and the presentation is the new skill currency, TDD, E2E, and AI power tools. And I work for Seon. It's been almost 9 months now, and it's the command center for fraud prevention and compliance. It was founded in 2017. We have plenty good funding, and we just declared Series C a few weeks ago. We stop billions of dollars of fraud every year, and it's been a wonderful gig. So if you see some opportunities about your career, if it's there's an opening, good fit, you can talk to me, and I can tell you more about the company. So 4 basic topics today: AI for test generation, TDD-first AI flow, AI customization and orchestration, and the new skill currency. I saw this presentation a while ago, and the link is at this YouTube channel. But the main message they were trying to get is they did plenty of research with real companies, and they realized that the productivity was going up about 30 to 40%. So AI makes it easy to generate, understand the code. But they realize that a lot of the code that they check in is found out to be later that there's some bugs, right? So that takes away from the productivity, and their net overall was lower. So this inspired me, like, what can I do so that we don't see any of this red, right? And we get all this green the first time, so we can check in better code while using AI. So for small scope tests, AI does great. Like, let's say I have some source code here. I tell it to write a unit test for it. It does a really good job. So I totally recommend it for writing unit tests. So if you haven't been writing those, AI will help you a lot doing that. So for mid-scope tests, for integration tests, there may be a few files, multiple repository. It even does a decent job with that. So the most difficult version of an integration test I can think is consumer-driven contract testing, like where you have 2 repositories. So here I'm prompting it, write a pack.js consumer-driven contract test for this and that. I have 2 repos in the workspace. Here's the consumer side file where the network calls are made. Here's the open API spec for the provider side. So even this context, it can figure things out, and it can write decent tests. So I would totally recommend using AI for writing integration tests. The larger the scope gets, though, the worse experience I have with AI. So I made a pyramid here again. So the more context with end-to-end, the least context with unit tests. And when I say end-to-end tests, I don't mean like naively clicking around in the browser. What I mean is spying on the network, like for instance, a site intercept, doing things in the browser, and then cross-verifying what you see in the browser versus like the network data. So like a full-fledged, full-aware end-to-end test like that. You have many files, you have network calls, you need system knowledge. So AI gets worse with end-to-end tests. The experience is not as consistent and reliable as in lower level testing. So that is my opinions for AI for test generation. So let's talk about TDD-first AI flow. So I love TDD with AI because it's a wonderful tool to help you hold the reins. So you write the test first, you ask AI to implement, and then you run the test, and then you refine the code or reject it, right? And then you repeat the same cycle. This can be end-to-end testing, it can be lower level testing. The idea is the same. Just use the test as the acceptance criteria and have AI code to it. That way, the TDD is the guardrail, and every AI generated change has to pass the test before proceeding. So the framework doesn't matter. So here I'm using REST util. This is a VS Code extension, and you can see the code sample here. It doesn't run in CI or anything. It's just locally. So we see some routes here, and then we can send some requests, like send a get request here, for instance, right? So you write the test, you tell AI, hey, here's like all my API endpoints. Let's say we're creating some backend. So you ask AI to implement, you say, here is my acceptance test file, and then you give it the test. I want to implement a route for, let's say, this get fake token route. And I want you to use the repository pattern, service repository adapter. And then I give it those files, and then it does its thing. And here is where you run the test, you refine it or reject it, and then you repeat the same thing. So here it was kind of easy. It was able to implement it after a little bit of modification. But the point is, it implemented just to get this test to pass, nothing more, nothing less. So TDD is pretty useful with AI. I think it works in an easier way, because what was difficult with TDD before was not writing the test. Testing was easy, but writing the source code to satisfy that test. So with AI, that becomes a little more easier for us. So let's talk about AI customization and orchestration. I like to use rules. So you may be using Cursor, Windsurf. They all have rules. Every time I talk about this, my boss loves to see me share my rules. So I'll go over them a little bit so you can copy this in my Git gist. I think for testing, right? I mean, they apply to any TypeScript framework, right? But for testing purposes, I have this section called testing best practices. I would say like anyone who goes after this definition of done criteria will have a pretty successful solution for their testing. So no flaky tests, no hard waits or sleeps, stateless, parallelizable, no order dependency, self-cleaning, test linear, the source code shifted left, release confidence, you run against CI deployments, all these. So if AI knows that you have these standards, then it's going to try to satisfy those in the first place. So I love to have those in my rules. You can copy that at the link after you see the presentation and to your respective solution, Cursor, Windsurf, or whatever you're using. I like to use memories, right? I like to make these memories. So let's say I have like an internal library. I call it Cypress utils. And then I tell it to read the docs, read the source code, check out the source code, check out the sample app, check out the test. Like here's how we like to do things. Contrast this to like how we do vanilla Cypress, right? Because I have certain ways of doing things. Everything I've nicely documented in this utility library. Let's say we're using internally in the company. And that's the way we want to do things here. And I have it go through all that. And then it takes a while, like sure, it learns it, all that. And then you can tell it, remember this and prefer to use this style in every new repository. So that's a way I like to use repositories. Mind that if you're using Cloud Code, the Cloud Code combines rules and memories into the cloud file. So Cursor may be having memories and other things separately, rules, Windsurf also, but Cloud combines them. I like combining them better, actually, but everything in one place. So it opens the repository, it knows about like everything that you wanted to know. One suggestion I have is utilize git ingest. So instead of doing this later on, I found that if we use git ingest, let's take a look at git ingest real quick. So it's this site, and basically like you can go and give it any repository. So like maybe I'll take one repository here, right? Let's say this one, and then I go back to git ingest, sorry, right here, and then you paste it in. If it's like a work repository, it's going to, you can click this like private repository thing, and then it has access to that temporarily. And then you say ingest, and then it downloads, like it gives like a text version of a full repository. So if you're trying to tell the LLM about a repository, instead of having it go through like all these files and folders, you can give it that, and it's going to know everything that there's to know about that. It's pretty context efficient and repeatable. That's why I like it a lot. So that's git ingest. So I like using MCPs, but mind that they take away from the context. I like to focus on the ones that, like, when it's writing code, I want it to write in the latest and greatest style. So I like, for instance, context 7, so that it can pull all the latest documentation about everything. The more we're doing work, like maybe the less, like the more capable the LLMs are getting, like maybe they like to use certain MCPs by default, but be selective in what you use and use them though, but not too many. I like to have AI or LLMs fight against each other, right? Oh, especially if there's something important like a code review or important decision to make about the code base, get multiple opinions. I use this in reviews, right? And then maybe I write, like I generate the code with one model and then I switch the model and I have the second model review it. It's pretty much the same idea with Cloud Code PR reviews or Windsurf PR reviews, Copilot for PRs, CodeRabbit. I would say use all these, like maybe at least get two of these. I've been the most impressed with Cloud Code reviews. So I shared a GitHub action here that it's basically you just use their GitHub action and it's all about, and you also put your Anthropic key, API key there, but it's all about the prompt, right? Like this is going to be fully customizable with you and it runs in CI and I would say it gives you world-class code reviews. And it's quite annoying sometimes, but it's most of the time it's right. And when it's not right, you can just reply to it in the PR. And on your next push, it knows about that. And it's like, okay, now we're not going to worry about that. I understand your explanation. And it really improves the code by a ton. So I really like that. I also like doing it locally. So I will always open a new context window. There's a custom command for you here that maybe you want your own, maybe you can like use this, but basically from some prompt engineering to give a decent code review. And later on, I'll show you something else that's even better, but that's coming later. Planning mode, right? A lot of the tools have started doing it. So you prompted something and it comes with like this to-do list, and it's usually a markdown document, right? Is It's quite useful when you collaborate with the AI. I have a nice big to-do list and it goes through things. Also, like when it's going through the list, it may run out of context and start acting out. So it's also useful for like starting a fresh new context and tell it, hey, this is what we've done until now, and then here's next. So it also kind of makes you think about context engineering, what could be better. Like Kiro is doing something different with spec-driven development, right? So it's a little better version of this. That makes me want to talk about something I've been obsessing about the past, I don't know how many months, right? All my open source time has been going to the BMAT method. So what is this BMAT method? It's actually named after a close friend, wonderful ex-colleague from Extend and Siemens, Brian Madison. So he came up with it. And effectively, it solves two core problems with LLMs. And we don't really know how to solve these problems, and it's not looking that bright in the future because the context window versus compute is getting to a logarithmic curve, right? So we're hitting some of our limits. So we have to solve these two problems. Number one, limited context, right? It's only smart for so long, and once you run out of context, it really starts acting out. Number two, the LLMs goes off rails. It does sometimes less work than you do it, sometimes more work than you ask it to, while being confident all the time and reassuring you, and you always have to call out the BS. So these are two big problems with LLMs. What is VMAT? It's effectively just the normal LLM plus a prompt engineering layer on top of that with AI agents mapped to agile roles. So it's basically replicating the way we've been developing software for the past quarter century. These agents, so PM, Scrum Master, Dev, Test, they generate agile artifacts. So for instance, the analyst generates a brief, the PM generates a product requirement document, the architect generates an architecture requirement document. So they generate these artifacts, and the BMAT method acts as a collaboration engine. So there's structured context. It's optimized for human versus AI collaboration. That way you keep the LLM on track. All these agents are prepackaged to always ask you clarifying questions versus taking a prompt from you and guesstimating what you might be wanting. And all these artifacts, these markdown files, effectively, they become the living context, right? So they become maybe a part of the repository. You continuously use them in new context windows, and they become documentation almost for the LLM and for you to be used in the future. And they always get continuously refined. So this is different than you write something in Confluence and it stays there. People may read it once, it never gets updated. So we have to keep updating it so that new context windows, the LLM knows about everything you've been doing. So here is the BMAT method cheat sheet. And you can find the link to the GitHub repository of BMAT method. It's free and open source. And here's my cheat sheet. So the analyst, while each one of these agents have multiple workflows, the main thing you want from it at the end is to create the project brief. So basically a summary of what that repository is doing, what the product is about. And then the product manager creates a more detailed thing called product requirements document. I'm sure your PMs have been creating this in your projects. And you have the architect who's creating the architectural requirements document or the specification. And then you have the product manager, again, planning the project. So maybe they're breaking the features into epics. And then you have your Scrum Master creating stories from that epic. And then maybe you have your test architect who's creating the test plan, a test design. So compare all these context engineering versus the to-do list, right? It's so much more detailed. There's no gaps. Each one of these artifacts, you're working with that agent together, right? Refining it continuously. The agent is asking questions, do you want this or that, like maybe it's doing market research. And you get a very high quality document at the end. You can create these from scratch, or maybe if you have a project already, like you have some product requirements document, you can feed that to that agent, and it actually is better starting from something that already is existing. So you can always refine your currently existing epic stories and requirement document and everything using these agents. So compare that to a to-do list and no development until this point. And at this point, you have some options. So the whole concept of this presentation is about using TDD to keep the AI on Rails. So you can use the test architect here optionally with the acceptance TDD workflow. So that's optional. Or you can do traditional, waterfall development. You can just use the developer agent to develop, who also has a TDD option. So if you want to do like low level unit level TDD, he also has that option. And then at the end, you can use the test architect to automate, right? To create automated tests. So that's my simple cheat sheet. BMAT method, you can use it with pretty much any LLM like ChatGPT, Gemini, Cursor, Cloud Code, all that. So I want to do a short demo. So I made a custom GPT here in this link, and once you get it, you can use it, free and open source. Let's close some of these tabs. So here I have the BMAT method loaded, and it says analyst, architect, dev, DevOps, product manager, PO, Scrum Master, all these guys, invoke any role to load the agent. Or let's say we want to talk to the analyst, right? And then it's going to load some files, and which are prepackaged prompt engineering for you. It says, hey, I'm Mary, your strategic business analyst. I'll help you analyze problems, define requirements, and here are my available commands. So let's say we want to brainstorm a project. Okay, we want to do this. I want to create an app, let's say for my wife, so she can track her credit card expenses. All right, so let's see what it comes up with. Perfect. Let's begin your project brainstorming session following the BMAT method and let's say context elicitation. Please answer briefly. What specific problem do you want to solve for your should be obvious, right? So the point I'm trying to make is like it doesn't just take something from you. It is always going to ask you these clarifying questions And if you have some ideas, it's going to like maybe facilitate further brainstorming with you. And all the agents are like this. So for instance, let's look at the Gemini, and then we can prompt the test architect. So test architect agent, I made it so that it can also work without all the context engineering. So if you have the stories and epics and everything, it's going to work better. But like if you don't have anything, if you just giving it some code, hey, write a test for this, then it can also work with that. And it's named after me because Brian suggested, hey, let's name it after you so you own it or something. And yeah, he kind of played me there, but for sure. So it will operate like I do, right? Functional helpers over page objects for sure, all the time. Test at the lowest level possible. No flaky tests ever. Set up via API, assert via UI. Like all these like things I've been talking about in my blog posts, videos, like courses, everything. It has that mindset. All right. So it's pretty opinionated. It's kind of a jerk sometimes, but yeah, I think like if you want to have me next to you, like working with you as you're creating tests or reviewing them, you have to give it a try. Like ask it for help, and it's going to tell you like the things that it can do, and that's the Gemini LLM. But let's see. Let's talk about this more. So all I do, by the way, to create these custom agents, follow the BMAT documentation. There are web bundles. Let's say like there's a web bundle for ChatGPT, and it will give you some XML files, like one for each of the agents, and then you just upload these to your custom GPT. Same idea in Gemini or wherever you're using this. Maybe a little more instructions, right, to like refine it. Then that's all it takes. But when you want to actually work on the code, right? Let's say you're using an IDE or maybe using Cloud Code, Codex, anything like that, you will want to install the VMAT method. It's npx install VMAT or something like that. I can't remember now, but you go to the docs and it will ask for like where you want to install it. You might specify your repository where you want to install it. You might specify the tools, for instance, like here, I'm installing for Cloud Code, Codex, and Windsurf. And then what it does is it will, if you may have these folders, you may not have these folders. Like if you have them, it's going to add the BMAT related files and folders accordingly. And then once you work with it, right, you'll work with the analyst agent to create like a brief of a product manager to create like a root level product requirement document and architecture requirement document. And then later, like with the PM and the Scrum Master, you'll be maybe working on a story, an epic, and then stories. Right. So this is the whole BMAT flow, and basically you have to create these artifacts so that your dev agent knows about all the context that it has to know about. And then you can imagine like every time you create a new window, for instance, let's say use the agent, you create a brief, and then you switch to the PM, and then you tell the PM about, hey, here's our brief, here's what we created. Now, help me create a product requirement document. And then with the architect, you follow that chain. And finally, at the dev, you maybe tell the dev, hey, here's our product, right? Because they have dementia. They can't remember anything in a new context window. And here's our product. You give maybe the requirement stack, the architectural spec, and then you tell it, hey, here's a story we're implementing, right? And then the dev just focuses on that story. And then you test it, of course, with the test architect. So the test architect I put a lot of time into it because I wanted to help my colleagues like do things the way I would, or at least review them the way I would review it. So I would have like little less work, doing work afterwards, right? So we thought this could be a good solution. Here are some of the commands that the test architect has. So you can use it with any framework. If you don't have any framework, the framework workflow will set it up. So imagine like I will set up Cypress, but the way I would like recommend, right? It will set up CI, same way. Test design / test plan, you could do that. It can do either acceptance, TDD, or it can just flat out automate. It can do test review. So this one was highly requested. Maybe you already have your test, but maybe you want a second opinion. It has that. For enterprise usage, we have NFR assessments or non-functional requirements. So you have your requirements, but then maybe you have NFRs for like stability, performance, security, things like that. They are big in enterprise. And finally, trace. So this traces your requirements to your tests and tries to find gaps. Right? Something you might be doing in a brownfield. Hey, what's our coverage? You get asked that question all the time, so you can concretely answer that question with this trace methodology. So that's it for BMAT method, free and open source. Check it out. Let me know if you have questions or suggestions for improvement. I would love to hear them. Now, so what's the skill? That's the new skill currency. We said so many things and it's been 30 minutes almost. So I would say the new skill currency is precision framing. So you want to nail down the exact problem boundaries. You want to provide the context so that AI zeroes in on what matters. So you can see that that's exactly what the BMAT method is trying to do with context engineering. You want to have a quality radar because you want to be able to spot good code versus bad code and refine it, or at least shout at the AI when it screws it up, right? You're like, what are you doing? And you, of course, debugging and troubleshooting skills. Those ambiguous by flaky tests, those are always useful, and keep those skills. Creative thinking is what's going to set you apart from the LLMs because at the end, they're going to be doing slight iterations of the same thing that's already been done, right? So it's on you to find unconventional solutions that scale. This is going to be a skill set that's important. Finally, soft skills like persuasion, collaboration, explaining ideas, rallying others. Always difficult, right? You may have the most excellent ideas, but people don't understand it, drive you crazy. So that's definitely a skill to have, right? To have people on your side and make things happen. What's my wish list? I want MCPs to integrate with test framework runners, right? So that it's easier for us to diagnose failing tests so that the AI knows about the network, the console, the environment variables, everything, not just the num, like everything. So I would love it if there were more MCPs that integrate with these test runners. I would like to see more AI versus AI interoperability, maybe like multi-model code reviews. We can start with that. Right now, I do all that manually, like trying to make it very difficult for me to commit a PR. It's like get one review, get a second review, just like you do PR reviews with real people, right? Multiple models. I would love to have the LLMs have better repository awareness, like Cloud Code does something neat. Codex initializes, right? I think so. This is getting there slowly, right? But bigger repositories may pose a problem. So I hope it gets even better. And I'd love to see more MCP tool limits. MCPs, they take away from the context, and context is the new oil. So it's a give and take, right? I would love to see those limits increase. So what have you learned? With AI, end-to-end testing is king. AI nails units and small integration tests, and end-to-end suites hold the reins. TDD first, or if you can't do TDD, fast follow testing mindset puts you in charge. Define your acceptance criteria upfront using your tests. Let AI code to them, run your checks, then define or reject. Easy. You keep it on Rails with tests. AI-powered tools, soft skills are your new currency. Layer in rules, memories, planning. BMAT method. I think either BMAT method or something like it is the future. We're going to need something like this. AI versus AI reviews, and master your precision framing, have a quality radar, debugging, and creative collaboration. And after that, you'll be in a pretty good place. That is pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. Maybe one final pro tip. All right, Jenna, we will take any questions.
Awesome. Murat, that was a really thought-provoking session. I think a lot of us are going to be rethinking how we approach problem framing and acceptance criteria after this one. We do have time for a couple of questions from the audience, and I've seen some already in chat, so I'm going to start with the ones that have come up so far. So I'm going to share a question here from Ryan, and his question is, how can we get these agents integrated into our own AI models like Claude?
Yeah, so when we install BMAT, right? Like I showed how we do it in ChatGPT, but when we install BMAT and we will select, let me go back to that slide. It's a little small, I know. I know it's a bit small, but and it doesn't get bigger. But basically, as you go through the installer, the most important place it will say select tools to configure. So like if you want to configure it for cloud code, what codecs, like everything's here. Everything that we know about is here, and people keep adding new ones if they need them. And then you'll see this like agents and commands folders get populated under your cloud folder. Also, it will be using some more stuff from BMAT. Um, I have to admit they will create about a few hundred markdown files, and my colleagues were concerned about that. So we will find better ways. I hope this week with Brian, so that the enterprise adoption is less. There's less friction there. But effectively, you can just git ignore that. Cloud Code works with git ignored files. The Windsurf doesn't, so I think we have to play around with the codium.ignore file a little bit. So there's some challenges with getting buy-in from everyone. Right? They don't like all these files for BMAT, but they don't always get used. Right? The agents selectively pick the files that they need. For instance, like the test architect, he has a lot of knowledge base, right? So those knowledge bases get selectively loaded based on the workflow that you're using.
Awesome. Thanks, Murat. All right, let's go on to our next question. And a question about what you have in your XML files. So like PM XML or QA XML, what content is in those?
That is a trade secret, but we can go and we can go and look at the BMAT method a little bit. Everything's there, like you can see it, all of this. But let's see this a little bit. So um, where this is version 4. This is version 4. So yeah, things are in different places. But we can maybe take a look a little bit. Let me see. I should have it somewhere. Open source CD. See what do we have? The tests. No, your repo. Let's see your repo. So I installed the BMAT method right here. I called it your repo. Let's close this one. Let's close this one. Let's close this one. Zoom in. See, now this is sample. So let's see, what do we have? BMAT, DMM, agents, test architect. So a lot of guardrails, right? A lot of prompt engineering, basically, telling it not to be an idiot, right? Because if you let it loose, it will totally do that. So, for instance, always load some files. Let's see, let's look at the rules. Some things about communication and some more details about framework. So you can see, like, based on the workflow, it's going to load different things, and it's going to like work with different knowledge bases. So some things are in flux, but you can like maybe take a look at these. For instance, what does it say about CI burn, right? Like additional prompt engineering based on what your workflow is basically. So there is, I would say, so what I did is like I created all this, right? And it came from like I fed it all my blog posts, all my repositories, sample repositories, how I like to do things and everything. And together we came up with like a knowledge base, because my opinion is that the testing knowledge out there is at best naive. And when I see my colleagues produce, when I saw my colleagues produce some test code, it would have all these anti-patterns that would make me shake my hand, like this is not the way. We have to teach the LLMs better. So then this came to happen. So if you want to look at the details, you can check out the DMAP method, go to the files, review them. If you have ideas for improvement, like if you want to call out, hey, this is wrong, let's make it better. It is open source, so we welcome old PRs. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
I think so. Let's go on to our next one. How has BMAT helped you in test reporting? And maybe more generally, how do you handle reporting in general?
I mean, for test reporting in the past, I have only relied on Cypress Cloud, so that helps me a lot. No BMAT methods helping there. But I mean, you could totally ask it, right? Like, hey, I have this sort of a system. Like, here is like to answer this question right now. Like, I would get like a flattened version of their repository, and maybe I would start talking about like asking about test reporting. Hey, like, what are my options for test reporting? And then it's probably going to answer like the LLM. You can ask in this question, but now it's going to answer with my perspective. Like, let's see. I have not used it for test reporting, not for BMAT. But
Awesome. Well, I see it's giving us back some direction, and as it's doing that, maybe you can leave that running on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and bring up our next question. And this one's from Joel, so I'm going to share this. Could all of those files be combined as headings in a Claude Markdown file?
I think he's asking about like all these BMAT files, right? Yeah, the longer these files are, the less effective they are. Like when you feed the LLM over the information, it may start acting. So you can try. You can try it. Go ahead if you want to use it that way. But the reason we have all these files is they get selectively loaded, right? Every time they get loaded, they do cause some context. So we want to be very, very conservative with that context and what we wanted to know. Right? I used to have something there for like a few thousand lines. Brian advised me on this, and that's not going to work. So we have to partition it. So I wouldn't recommend it. But you know, the best teacher is Taylor, right? So go ahead and try it and let me know how it goes.
Report back, please. All right, let's go ahead and let's share out our next question. Can BMAT be integrated with the ChatGPT free version?
I would say yes. So we could try this out, right? So we had the link, I think, right? So like BMAT agent with all agents. So let's have to open something with incognito. Let's see. I mean, to create the custom GPT, I don't think you can do free. But if you want to use something that's already free, you might be able to. So maybe I can post this in chat and then they can try this out. I haven't used ChatGPT free, but I would say yes, because right now, for instance, I don't have free Gemini. I don't have paid Gemini in my personal laptop. I have it at work. By the way, at Seon, it's amazing. We have access to everything. Like you can nerd it out, try everything. So it's a wonderful company in that perspective. Yes, for Gemini for sure. For ChatGPT, go ahead and try it.
Okay. And then I have another question for you. This one's from Ryan. How would you suggest our team transitions from a regular workflow to using the BMAD method?
So that's a pretty good question because that's what I'm trying to do at work, right? I'm trying to pilot it. So so right now you're just prompting the LLMs, right? It's just doing basic workflow. So I would pick a task. Let's say you're migrating Selenium tests in Python to Cypress, right? So I would start with the analyst. I would describe them this problem. We tell, hey, here's our challenge. Like here's our Selenium test, right? You want to convert these to Cypress, and then the analyst would write a nice little brief, right? And then you start a new context, right? Always keeping the context fresh. And you talk to the product manager, you feed them the brief, and then you tell them about the problem, and then it's going to work with you refining this, right? Like every time it's creating these documents, the agent is working with you for you to define it. And after that's done, perhaps you may talk to the like test architect if it's like a fully test related task. And then I've seen it like sometimes it's quite smart, right? Hey, you don't really need like Epic for this. We can just create like a text spec. So the text spec, then you feed it the brief, you feed it the product requirement document, and then it's going to create some maybe test related text spec. And then you and your team review it. And then when you're doing the task, you like, maybe like, let's say you're like migrating some tests from Selenium, like you select a test and then you give it the brief, you give it the PRD, and then you get the text back, and then you're like, hey, this is what we want to do, and let's work on this test. And then the test you use the automate workflow of the test architect, and then it's going to work with you about refining it, right?
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that insight, Murat. I have one more question for you from the audience, so I'm going to share that up on screen. This question is from an existing BMAD user, and they're wondering if it is possible to convert a project which was already set up with the BMAD method, and you want to swap it to TDD. Is it possible? What procedures would you use?
So they have already PRDs, briefs, and everything. They even have epics. I'm pretty sure they have stories, right? So they want to do the remaining epics to be done with TDD. I mean, look, all it's going to take is when you're starting the story, like what do you normally do when you use BMAT? You just say, start develop, right? That's the developer workflow. So instead of that, you tell it, you go to the test architect, you say, star ATDD, acceptance test driven development. And it's going to look at the story, right? You feed it the same documents. You would feed it the developer agent. So that would be like the epic, the story, maybe the architectural spec, right? And then you would have the test architect write a failing story, right? The failing test. Of course, it's not going to work. It's going to maybe have like type errors even, but that's going to be there, right? And then, new context, you switch to the developer agent. And then you have basically one more piece of context to feed to that, right? You feed it the PRD, like everything, like brief, story, epic, all that. And then additionally, you feed it, hey, here's the failing end-to-end test I wrote. Take this also into consideration and let's code to this, right? You can do this. In fact, if you have documentation, like let's say you wrote some documentation, you can even use the documentation as the acceptance criteria. So that way, you and the LLM agree on a contract, right? So that it doesn't go out of bounds. You really keep it in track that way.